Welcome back to Wolverine Confidential, your Michigan sports podcast. I'm your host, Eli Zink.
I'm Aaron McMann, Michigan football beat writer here at MLive.
And I'm Ryan Zuke, here to talk Michigan softball.
All right, guys, we've had pretty exciting weeks. The weather is turning. We're actually doing fun things again instead of just yelling out the window. You just got back from France, Aaron. It sounded like you had an awesome time. I was super jealous and tweeting at you every couple of days, as you might have noticed.
Yes.
And
Apparently, he thinks he's still in France because, wearing shorts to the podcast
He
today.
looks good. For those listening.
Flamingo-colored shorts.
Yep. He looks real good.
They're
Casual
they're
shirt.
supposed to be red, and I've got a collared shirt on, so I don't hear any complaining here.
Did you get those at H&M?
I did not.
But
no.
in Paris?
No, I did
that
not.
takes it to it. All right. So you're in France. You're with the football team. You probably didn't get to do a ton of tourist stuff outside of their schedule.
Yeah. We got to do quite a bit, actually. The one thing, everything was so jam-packed. We were there 6 nights, 7 days. Michigan had a full schedule. It was pretty much 9 to 5, 9 to 6. There were some nights where we didn't get back till late. But they crammed a lot into a short period of time. We got to do, as I'm sure those of you watching or listening, read, they saw the Eiffel Tower, they saw the Louvre Museum, they spent the day in Normandy. So there was a lot going on. It was exhausting from a player standpoint. I think I'd be tired just because they got no breaks. You're going from one stop to the next. They're eating in between. And they're leaving the hotel 8 or 9 in the morning and not getting back till 6. So it's a full day. I'm sure. I know we were exhausted. I'm sure they were exhausted.
So 2 questions for you about France. First, what was sort of your first trip across the Atlantic. What did you take away from it from a standpoint of being with the football team and how you were received by locals?
Yeah. The American sport, that's one of the things I noticed pretty quickly over there. American sports aren't a big deal over there. Obviously, soccer's huge, and some
football to them.
Yeah, right, and it's American football, they call it. And it wasn't as big of a deal. I mean, some people, I think, knew who they were or recognized them. They got a lot of looks from people because I think they were bigger and there's these big, tall athletes. I think some people might have mistaken them for basketball players. But, there wasn't the huge mob maybe some may expect. Jim Harbaugh did take a few pictures. I think he signed a few autographs. I think some of those folks were Michigan grads, whether they were over there in France already or maybe following the team. I don't know.
Expats,
Yeah. So I don't know, but it wasn't the whole them walking down the street and then getting recognized right away.
So did anyone grab you like, it's Aaron McMann? Hold
No, I didn't get that, thankfully.
Next time.
Yes,
for sure. So, and for the players that went, obviously a lot of them maybe wouldn't be in the circumstance to go over there, as it's difficult to get to go overseas.
Yeah, it's not cheap.
How was it? How was the response to just being in a foreign country? Now, a lot of these guys, of course, were in Italy last year.
Sure. So
now they're just like routine travelers. But I imagine for some people, it was really something special.
Yeah, some of the players, they said they'd never been out of the country. I think Joe Milton was one of those guys. He'd never left the U.S. So to not only leave the country, but go fly over the ocean and go to another continent, I think is a big deal. Many of the guys have never been to France, so it was an eye-opening experience. Just like last year in Italy and Rome and everything else. They got to see things and do things they probably wouldn't get to do otherwise. The same goes for me. I don't know if I'd ever go to France otherwise without the trip. So it's a cultural experience they did not practice. It was one where it was all experience after experience and tourist thing after tourist thing.
Right. And when you were there, was there any emphasis at all on football, or was it really entirely cultural?
It was pretty much cultural. I know the first full day they were there. They did a football clinic with some locals. I think they said it sold out. There were 300 people that signed up.
When you wrote about that, I thought that was really fascinating. There was that much interest when soccer is the
Right.
is the thing.
And I don't know if it was a fascination of the team or desire just to see what they do. I don't know what the reasoning was, but there was people of all ages. That was the weird thing. You had younger kids obviously would be interested maybe meeting Jim Harbaugh or some of these athletes, but you had grown men that were there too. They were interested in learning and watching and everything else. And there was definitely more teaching that went on than actual playing football. But it was good to see. That was probably the one and only real football experience they got the whole trip.
And the rest was cultural. What an experience. What an opportunity for these guys. I mean, if I was a recruit and part of the package was going overseas, I mean, I think I might be looking at Michigan pretty seriously. To get into the nitty-gritty of football, though, Phil Steele's punch the numbers, and it looks like Michigan is going to have the 3rd toughest schedule next year, and we talked last week when you were gone about the possibility of the road to the playoffs or the road to the national championship with the anointed savior of the program, not Harbaugh, but Shea Patterson.
Yes.
But this looks like the type of thing that's going to get in the way for the ultimate goal of the team, which is probably the Big Ten championship, college football playoffs. Is this schedule really that tough?
I think it is. That's one of the things we've kind of glossed over the last few months. It's one of those things where it's happening, so it's one of those, they're going to play it anyway. But yeah, this when you crunch the numbers, Phil Steele, he looked at the opponent win percentage from last season of everyone they're playing this year. It's the third highest in the country. It's 62.7%. Look at the numbers right now. Michigan's 12 opponents this coming season went to combined 96 and 57 last year. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
6 of them finished the season ranked. 7 of them had winning records. 7 of them played in bowl games. So a lot of the Michigan schedule is going to be difficult this fall. I think we knew that going in. They've got Ohio State. They got Michigan State both on the road. They've got Wisconsin at home, obviously. They've got Penn State, Notre Dame. They open at Notre Dame.
Right.
So it's going to be difficult. Obviously these numbers are a little skewed because we're going off of last season. Everything from this, and Phil Steele points it out too. But this is the way the NCAA does it. I mean, there's no other way to,
It's only
gauge.
information, right?
Yeah, you can't really gauge. Well, you know what these teams are bringing back, but at the same token, you can only go off past results. So it's tough. The numbers bear that out. It may not be as tough as it says right now at the end of next season, but they got to play the schedule. That's why they play the schedule. So like you mentioned, going over the schedule, they open at Notre Dame. It's going to be incredibly difficult on the road to start. Then they come back home they got Western Michigan, Southern Methodist. Western played pretty well last year. SMU had a decent year, and then they jump into the Big Ten schedule. They open at home against Nebraska. They go on the road at Northwestern, another team that had a winning record and got in a bowl game last year. They host Maryland, host Wisconsin, who gave them fits last year on the road, and then you got Michigan State, Penn State, Rutgers, Indiana, Ohio State. So
Look out for Rutgers.
It's going to be difficult. Yeah, well, I mean it's a road game, so it's going to be a difficult schedule. Michigan definitely has their work cut out in front of them. I mean, I think they'll be a better team. We talked about this before the podcast started, but I think this will be a better team. I think the offense will be better, but the schedule is not doing them any favors.
So this is a question for both of you guys, and Zuke, you can chime in, especially from maybe the baseball, softball perspective or the hockey perspective. And hockey is actually interesting when you think about this, but is the sort of stigma that's associated with playing on the road really that important in these games? And for the football team, Penn State, stadium like that, it seems to be a factor, but Michigan travels really well across all sports. Tons of alumni all over the country, so that's probably a factor. And it makes me think, is it really going to be the determining factor, or will a talented enough team won't matter? Or does a talented team still slip up in a tough environment?
I think it's a combination of all that. I think last season you're right about that. Michigan travels incredibly well. I remember the games at Maryland, at Indiana. There were almost more Michigan fans there than the local team. I think that helps to some degree because Michigan feels more comfortable and they're maybe not dealing with the loud, a huge crowd that's cheering against them. So it relaxes them a little bit more. But you're right. If they're good enough, I think they should and can win. And that's, at the end of the day, football, you keep in mind, football is one game every week. So it's one game they're preparing for the entire week. It's a big deal. It's not like they're playing a 3-game weekend series like softball or baseball. It's one game. So it's different in that respect, but at the same time, a good team should win.
Right. Zook, what do you think? Do you think the stigma behind that is legit?
Well, I mean, if you look at the softball team, they were undefeated at home heading into this week, and then I go and cover 2 games, and they lose both of them. So, but I mean, they've been dominant at home in recent memory. So last year they had a long winning streak. I don't think they lost at home until the Big Ten tournament. So I mean, I think there's a comfortability factor there for baseball, softball. Hockey, I don't think it matters as much, especially when it comes tournament time. And Michigan went into Boston and beat BU and beat Northeastern, who were basically playing in their backyard, and they beat both of those teams to reach the Frozen Four.
Right.
And then, I mean, when you get to Frozen Four in Minnesota or St. Paul, Michigan got the last change in the 2 games against the Boston team, so I think that's the last change is what you really want. So that's
for hockey. That's a very
I mean,
particular
that you
thing.
can help out with the home team, but I mean, crowd factor. I mean, I guess Minnesota Duluth was basically had the home crowd at the Frozen Four, and they came away with the championships despite being the lowest seed. But I don't think in hockey it's as much of a factor. I mean, Washington last night, Capitals finally knocking off the Penguins. And Pittsburgh was at home too. So I think you see a lot more road teams win in hockey than I think football, baseball, softball.
Yeah. So the thing that's going to be the key factor for Michigan football going forward probably is when it gets down to specific parts of the team that they're looking to patch up. And we talked a little bit about this in previous weeks with the O-line and the tackle situation. But beyond that, schematically speaking, it's come to light recently that they're starting to simplify things. How's that going to affect the team going forward? And are you hearing anything about it while you were over there, guys talking about it?
I think it bodes well, first of all. You know, that's the one thing we've heard all spring long is things are just easier with the offensive line, whether it's their reads or their preparation or the less information they're taking in. You know, I think that goes back to last season when Michigan, and they still do to some degree, but they look at this as if they're preparing these guys to play in the NFL. So it's almost like an information overload for some of these guys, especially the younger ones. The guys that have been in college 1 or 2 years, haven't started much or haven't played a lot, they're getting crammed, or at least last year and the year before, they're getting crammed with all this information that, you know, so, you know, say someone calls an audible at the line of scrimmage and things change from an opponent's defensive perspective. They don't know how to do it. They don't know how to react, or they think they know how to react, but there's this little thing that they forgot about because they're been overloaded with so much stuff. So Ed Warner, the new offensive line coach, sounds like he's really come in. Dumbed down is not the right word, but they've simplified things. You know, instead of taking 5 or 6 reads at the line of scrimmage, or looks at the line of scrimmage, or checks, they're doing 2 or 3. So it's less information they're taking in, and I think in a way it's making things easier. Now that's not to say that they may not revert back to that, you know, maybe in fall camp or once the season starts, but they're basically starting from scratch. You know, Ed Warner made it a point when he spoke to us early in the spring. He came in, he evaluated all the offensive linemen individually, looked at their tape, sat down with them and went over their tape with them, looked at their strengths, their weaknesses. He almost assigned a spot for each of them. This is where I want you to start out with. This is what we're going to plug in with you. This is the information we're going to give you, and we're going to go from here. Now, we can make changes later on, but this is what I want you to focus on right now. And last year, I remember talking to Drevno last fall, right before the season started, but they were having guys play 2, 3, and sometimes 4 spots. They were learning multiple spots in case they needed to rotate or change guys in or whatever the case may be. And I think that wears on guys after a while. You know, we talked about how young the line was last year, and they're still young to some degree now. But when you're giving them all this and giving them all this responsibility, things are going to break down, and we saw that with the offensive line quite a bit last season.
So after you did all this analysis and you've had a little bit of insight to a somewhat submarine spring, what do you think it's going to look like? We know the interior is pretty set, and I think you answered this in maybe one of your mail questions or Twitter questions. But how do you see the tackles rounding out? Right.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like they've got basically 4 guys that have been kind of rotating with the 2 tackle spots. I mean, you've got Jawan Bushell-Beatty, you've got Nolan Ulizio, you've got John Runyon, you've got Andrew Stuber, you've got
Filiaga's there.
Filiaga's there, James Hudson's out there. So you've got 4 or 5 guys that are really in there. It sounds like, from when I've been able to gather, it's probably going to be Runyon and Jawan Bushell-Beatty, at least right now. I don't know which. It sounds like Bushell-Beatty's been repping more at left tackle, but he says he's also repping a right tackle. So I think right now it's those 2 spots are interchangeable. It sounds like Runyon and Bushell-Beatty are the top 2. But again, you've got summer workouts to go through. You've got fall camp. You know, somebody comes back and fall out of shape or something like that.
Right.
And that could bode changes here.
And do you think there's a tendency for, so Bushell-Beatty right now probably is what he is. Do you think there could be drastic improvement from him this summer, or is that more going to be the younger guys who, maybe something clicks while they're learning the system, or they just really put on that weight they need to in the weight room or become more athletic? Is that sort of a factor, the age difference, and where you could see the varying improvement?
I think so. Bushell-Beatty he's a 5th-year senior, so you're not going. I think you know what you got out of him. He's reliable. He's good in run protection. I think he has some work to do in pass protection. Whether or not he can bridge that gap in time for fall camp remains to be seen. But you know what you've got there. Now, if you see development in some of the young guys, like we've talked about, Filiaga or James Hudson or Ulizio or whoever, Andrew Stuber. You can plug one of those guys in potentially, maybe in certain spots, and maybe Bushell-Beatty isn't a every down tackle. Maybe they bring in someone else, in pass protection or whatever the case may be. But I think right now, from a development standpoint, you're looking more at those younger guys. I think they like what they've got there. They're just so young right now, haven't played a lot. But you've got, Runyon's a similar situation where he's been around the program for several years now. You know what you got out of him. He played quite a bit last year. He's got the experience, so he's been there. Now it's just about gelling and putting it together, on a game-by-game basis.
Sure, sure. To move to another position group, is this possibly going to be the start of what is maybe the most talented receiving core Michigan has had since 15 years, maybe?
Yeah, you'd have to. Go back to the Braylon Edwards days or the
David Terrell,
days.
Walker.
Yeah.
That was a serious group. But this group,
I think they have the potential. Yeah. Now, maybe not this season, but down the line. Keep in mind, these guys all have at least 3 years of eligibility left, so you got time for them to grow. But I think the potential and the ceiling is there. You've got. I'm really high on Donovan Peoples-Jones. I think he has the ability to be very good, as I'm sure
he's just
everyone's
an athletic.
He is, yeah.
Phenom.
And I think things are starting to turn in his mind. Right. And you saw that at the end of last season. You saw him start to go for balls and jump for things and create things. And so he's improved. Tariq Black, I think you saw at the beginning of last season, turned out to be a very good. He had the potential to be, I think, a potential All Big Ten guy.
It was a tragedy because he has sort of, he's as athletic as you'd want him to be at 6'3", right?
Yeah.
But he was really going in and out of his breaks, like a veteran. Whereas that was Peoples-Jones wasn't running routes like you might see from someone who's maybe.
We had a little bit of a microphone disaster.
We have a little slight microphone malfunction, but we'll get that all sorted out.
Oh, look at that back on.
There we go.
Keep it up here for the rest of
a writer and tech genius, a man of all trades, Ryan Zuke. Let's talk about Tariq Black. He's polished, but how much does losing basically an entire year, is he going to be effectively a freshman again in the sense that he has 2-3 games of experience?
Yes and no. Yeah, he played 3 games. He hasn't played a ton, but I think the way he looked as a true freshman, the way he came out and played, I think bodes well for his future. He clearly picked things up early on. He was comfortable with the offense, so I don't think that's going to go away. What I'm curious to see is his speed and his agility and his quickness off the breaks here early on next season. Does he still have it? He broke his foot. That's a big deal.
Sure.
It affects it can affect your movement and your speed with some folks. From all things we've heard, it sounds like he's the same guy as he was last year. But again, we haven't seen anything, so we're going off what we've been told.
Right, and
he started in front of Donovan Peoples-Jones last year.
He did.
Yeah.
He did.
He was more polished coming in.
Yeah.
And it bodes well that it was a break rather than something with his ligaments.
Right.
That's helpful. But broken bones can be something.
Sure.
So now that your mic is all set and
working,
and it's going to be working. Let's transition a little bit to the Diamond. The Michigan softball and baseball teams have seen varying levels of success this year. Strong starts, 20-game win streaks, and softball specifically maybe ended the season on a little bit of a sour note.
They did. I went to 2 games last week, like I said earlier, and they lost both in pretty convincing fashion, too. Sunday's game against Ohio State didn't mean anything. They already had the Big Ten title wrapped up. They're 10th in the last 11 years. There wasn't much to play for, but you would still like to see go on into the postseason on a high note, and they gave up 10 runs in the first 3 innings and were mercy ruled at home for the first time since 2000. So
that's a big deal, though, right? With the players, did you talk to them afterwards?
Yeah,
were they upset,
we had one player, Faith Canfield, who was one of the players that actually got a hit for the Michigan's offense that game. She's been one of the most consistent players all year, but it's been the last couple of weeks since their winning streak was snapped. It's been inconsistent at the plate. Okay. So they were averaging over 5 runs a game coming into this weekend and only scored more than 5, 2 out of two of their last 8 games. So that's kind of an alarming trend for them heading into where you need consistent at bats, and Coach Hutchins was not very happy after either. She was frustrated. She put it on her players. She said they have to be held accountable. It's on the leaders in that room to step up and because they rely on a lot of young players, and they need to know. It's all about confidence at this level. They played 53 games. You're not going to improve much at this point in the year. It's when you step into the batter's box, do you feel like you're going to get a hit and make contribute to the team? So, right. And then pitching wise, Megan Beaubien, 32-3 this year, leads the league or leads the nation in
That's
wins.
crazy, isn't it, for a freshman? I mean, she's unreal.
Dominant left, and Coach Hutchins can't say enough good things about her. But when she's not in the circle, I mean, she's probably going to be pitching a lot in these upcoming weeks. Yeah, that left arm of hers is turned to be sore.
So we talked about this a little before the show, but I thought it might be worth bringing up here. So a softball pitcher is going to throw 115, 130 pitches, something like that. Now, is it the motion that specifically that allows her to pitch 35 games? You would never see that out of anyone on the baseball team. They're not going to pitch 35 games. There's just too much wear and tear on the arm. Right, and Tommy John, I don't think is that a thing in softball.
I haven't heard of it.
But
yeah, it's definitely more prevalent in baseball. That's for sure.
So that motion is much more conducive to taking a lot of
less stress on the arm for sure.
There is, yeah.
But I mean, when you throw 130 pitches, I don't care how you throw it. It's your arms are going to get pretty sore, especially when you have to throw back-to-back days, 3 days in a row. I mean that can add up, and you might not be as sharp, might leave one over the plate. And, I mean, you're just not as effective when your arm gets a little bit tired. So that's why they would like to have someone else step up and be able to get some outs. But, I mean, the last 2 games that I was at against Western Michigan and Ohio State, Tara Blanco and Sarah Schaefer, Schaefer's another freshman who's had they're all ranked in the top 6 in ERA in the Big Ten, but they gave up 8 runs against Western, which was then a season high, and then 10 more on Sunday against Ohio State. They were hit hard too. Like there were some long home runs, line drives. So is
some of this going to be due to fatigue, given that they are freshmen, probably not used to playing such a rigorous schedule?
I think that could be a factor too. But I mean, it's the end of the season. You kind of just have to put that behind you and realize, I mean, this is your season's on the line coming up now. Right. I mean, it's you win or go home coming up here in the next couple of weeks.
And so as they wrap up the season and they enter tournament time, what are some of the big areas of concern as a program? I mean, we talked about the pitchers maybe getting beat up every now and then, but truly is it a function of the lack of hitting, or just the team not performing up to their ability? What's going to?
I mean, they're still a really good team. I mean, they're 43-10. They're ranked 16th in the nation. So I mean, they have a good softball team. They can win a few games. They can do some damage in the regional, but they have to put it together on a daily basis. I mean, losing 8-2 at home to Western Michigan. I mean, even though if it's a non-conference game, I mean it's a letdown. They've made some costly errors. They were the second best fielding team in the nation heading into this week, and they made 4 errors against Ohio State and two errors against Western Michigan. There was another play where pop-up in between the pitcher, first baseman, and catcher, and nobody went to grab it. And Coach Hutchins says, I mean, that's just mental right there. Like, you have to be in the game.
Can't beat yourself.
Right.
So on the bright side, they are young, and this probably bodes really well for the next few years, where they might get up into that sort of tier where they're sort of dominant, or might be in the World Series. Right. Could make a run this year potentially, I imagine.
I mean, yeah, when you have Megan Beaubien for another 3 years, I mean, she'd go down as one of the greatest college softball pitchers of all time. She has that much potential. So, I mean, 4 pitches, a good fastball, good changeup, a little curve, rise ball. I mean, it can fool hitters. But you need,
Would you step into the batter's box against her?
I'm a left-handed batter, so I'd be scared. Maybe if she was a righty, but
I don't think I'd have a prayer. Most of Ann Arbor and the country wouldn't either. Real quick, before we wrap up, just a quick note on baseball as they wrap up their season.
Right, they have their final home series this weekend against Illinois. They're tied for first place in the Big Ten right now with Minnesota, 14-3. They're 29-14 overall. So that 20-game win streak earlier this year really helped them, and they're got a good chance of making the NCAA tournament again. So they'll be looking to bring home the Big Ten title.
We'll have to check back in on that next week. Thank you again for joining us this week. Gentlemen, thanks for being on the show. We'll be back a week from now, and until then.